Hi there.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining, Alessandra.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I guess to get us started, do you want to tell us a little bit about your role over at Fossil, both from day to day and then also kind of the community efforts and association type of work that you're doing there?
Sure. So, hi, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Alessandra Antenucci. I'm the Senior Global Brand Marketing Director on Fossil Brand over at Fossil Group. In addition to that, I'm also a founder of a queer-owned business, Queernella, that celebrates Pride all year long. But my role at Fossil and the topic we'll be discussing today is really centered around LGBTQ plus marketing as a huge global brand. And our day-to-day, for my team at least, is really centered around the global marketing guidance. So Fossil has, organizations around the globe really centering around what is our campaign initiatives and how do we communicate that out to the regions, to help build awareness for the brand at the different stages of the business that they're all at.
Okay, great. So, and looking through the lens of what we're talking about today, how does Fossil and how does your team go about including, diverse voices from the LGBT community and making sure that people feel represented in the marketing work that you're doing?
Sure. So, of course, we want to celebrate Pride in the month of June and really be there to be an ally to the community, to our customers, to our coworkers, etc. But really, inclusion starts year round. And for us, we make sure that throughout our marketing initiatives, whether it's various other campaigns through influencer marketing or through other community means, that we're really making sure that we're engaging with the LGBTQ community and have representation throughout our marketing initiatives.
Okay, great. I know you mentioned, and I kind of skipped over myself. I'm Larry Beaman, and I'm Chief Growth Officer at Gen.video, and we're an influencer company, grounded in social commerce. And so I know you mentioned influencers there. So, are there any favorite influencers that you've partnered with this year from the LGBT community that people would know out there?
Sure. So I have Rafni there. She identifies as a lesbian, and she has a wife that's a doctor, and they have a beautiful family. So we worked with them during our campaign initiative, and they just give a great reminder that families can look many different ways, and that's important, especially as we talk about what certain bills mean that are coming up in the U.S. around Don't Say Gay or other things, and how they affect children when speaking about their family. But also Blair Amani, she's been in our Pride campaigns multiple times. If anyone hasn't checked out her content, she does these 60 tongue twister second videos called Smarter in Seconds, and really addresses a multitude of human rights issues or political issues at hand, or just in general things that make you smarter in 60 seconds that you should know more about. And she created a video for us centered around Pride Month and what it means to be an ally, both in and outside of the community, because that allyship is important in the LGBTQ community as well. So she's also a great resource if someone wants to learn more about things going on in the world today, specifically the US.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess what other, ways is the brand connecting with the community through, whether that's custom-made content for those voices outside of influencers? I guess just what other maybe events do you participate in or have recently that people would want to know about?
Sure. So for us, we really focus on our work within empowering young people. So we've worked with the Trevor Project for the last 2 years, as well as some other LGBT organizations. So what we'll try to do throughout the year is engage those organizations to see how we can both continue to collaborate with them throughout the year, but then also bring their knowledge inside of our four walls or virtual four walls so that we can continue to educate our community, our fossil community from within about topics that are going on in the that affect the LGBTQ community.
Kind of got it. Yeah. And so I know that was kind of the next question up was, every marketer is, focusing more and more on Gen Z. And so has there been, recent changes of like how you approach that community compared to others, or, do you have different messaging for the like from Gen Z to millennial to baby boomer? Do you kind of approach them differently, or is there like a cohesive message for all?
I think there's a cohesive message really for all. I think what we try to do, because Fossil is a large global brand, we really try to kind of talk about things that cross over generationally and also culturally. So for instance, this year's campaign, Take a Minute, was really about taking a minute to understand the community, taking a minute within the community to celebrate, but also taking a minute for allyship. So for us, we really try to find that crossover because, marketing spend isn't endless, unfortunately. So we really want to make sure that we're creating something that applies. And you'll see that with the influencers that we use. They were a multitude of ages, and their content kind of shifts in between different generations, but I don't think it felt exclusive to a demographic. It really was inclusive for that.
Got it. And then speaking to kind of going back a little bit to what you said earlier, the community does not love it when, brands are like, it's June.
Yeah.
I'm going to change the color of my logo. I'm not going to do anything else. And I know you just mentioned the year-long campaign that you're doing, but I guess for brands that are trying to approach it in a better way, when you talk about the always on annual campaigns, like, are those coming like utilizing voices from the community, but speaking, just about their experience with the brand, or is it kind of pride focused all year long?
No, I mean, I think it's about representation, right? So we don't always need rainbows, and to resemble I think Pride Month is about using our voice and celebrating in a month and making sure that we have a spotlight on the issues that affect us year round. And I think brands have a place to use their platform during that month to elevate that conversation. But at the end of the day, that conversation is elevated during that month because it needs to be recognized throughout a whole year. So for us, it's about representation. So when you talk about Valentine's Day, making sure that you have representation for what Valentine's Day is to a multitude of different relationships, not just, a cis heteronormative definition of what a couple is, and or gifting messages, or even Father's Day, celebrating, or Mother's Day, celebrating in an inclusive way to any type of family unit that you may have. But then also just, influencers are a great resource to increase your diversity among your marketing. And just, at the end of the day, a style influencer, making sure that you're representing the community that is shopping your brand or the community at large from just a Gen Pop perspective is important. So I think always making sure that you have that reflection in your marketing campaigns is really important year round as well. And then for us also internally is a huge importance for us. So Fossil is rated a 100 on the HRC's best places to work for the LGBT community, and that is also year round. And we make sure that that is expressed as well when we talk about it during Pride, but even outside of Pride.
Yeah, absolutely. That's amazing to hear. And in doing research for the call, I was starting to Google and I was like, oh, I hope I come across all these wonderful things that they're doing and not, one of the companies that is, again, promoting those things. And I was able to find so much on the organization. But, I think you mentioned it a little bit earlier, but if there's anything you can expand on across, if it's still called the Fossil Foundation with the HMI partnership or with the Trevor Project, like you were saying, just that community work that the organization is doing, if that's funding, if that's like days off for
Mhm.
employees and volunteering or any of that.
Yeah, sure. So Fossil Group does give VTO time. So, and you are highly asked to use it. So, which is great. And you can use that for a variety of topics, not specific to any kind of specific time of year or initiative. HMI, the Hedrick Martin Institute, is one of the nation's oldest youth LGBT organizations. They have been a previous partner for years of the foundation. So there's Fossil Brand Group, Brand, and then there's Foundation. And now 1% of our proceeds of every purchase go to foundation work. And that is to really help encourage, and inspire opportunity for young people globally. And as part of that initiative, working with young LGBT people, because, in many cases, they could be disadvantaged in certain ways. So HMI does a lot of work around that. And then with Trevor Project, they were a brand partner that we brought in. And so Fossil donates 100% of their proceeds of their Pride product to Trevor Project. And Trevor Project is one of the nation's largest youth LGBT organizations to support in mental health and assistance for young people within the community. And, that is specifically really important to us because the southern region of the US has the highest suicide rate of LGBT youth than any other part of the country. So being in Texas, they're a great partner for us, and we see them as a key resource for this area that we live in.
Yeah, absolutely. And so in speaking to that and everything that's going on, do you have, I guess, 6 sides to this question, a positive outlook on behavior and consumer expectations and what will stick and be positive in the future, or kind of like, what are your thoughts and thinking about everything that's happening right now and kind of where we're headed as a population?
Sure. So I think, where we're headed as a population, unfortunately, will bring equality issues, I think, across the board to many different groups. And I think brands, especially those who speak for Pride and for the LGBT community or other communities during different initiatives throughout the year, will start to be held accountable for support in other ways. So I think it's a hard line we walk as a brand, and it just always goes back to authenticity. So, you want to be able to support a community, not just profit off of them. So I think it's really important for brands to kind of take that step back as these laws are changing. And what does that mean for the impact, not only for the community that they're marketing to, because they want to be able to celebrate that time of year with them, but then what does it mean for the internal organization as well and the people that work for them? So, being employee first is always a great start for authenticity, I believe. And thankfully, at Fossil, we definitely live and breathe that. And then making sure that any initiatives that you act on for communities within your customer segments are also feeling that authenticity of support is really important.
Absolutely. So like a little add-on question of that one has, as Fossil, are you still a remote company? Are people everywhere?
Mm-hmm.
Are people allowed to move, based on kind of what's going on? Or has that not been approached yet?
So currently we are a hybrid organization. So some of us have returned back to our office, but at the same time, even before these issues were coming up, after COVID, some people do work remotely just because culture overall has changed. I think as political climates change, this is definitely a topic that is going to become a hot one. And I just think it's an ever-changing climate. So as of right now, we don't really, I know that there's discussion around it, but we don't, I don't have an answer for that, but I would imagine that as things continue to change, it's definitely something that brands and companies need to be aware of in the states that they operate and how it affects their employees.
Absolutely. So I guess for you personally, do you you think that brands should, have a strong voice politically about issues like this, or more so, make sure they're putting funds where they think it should be and not quite as loud? Kind of where would you personally love lots of brands to be like, is it their space to be, pushing the political space or not as much?
Yeah. I think that's a really difficult question, and it depends on what's authentic to a brand. So I think lots of brands can make bold political statements, but then at the same time, they're donating to parties that are voting against a lot of the rights that they're trying to empower their employees for. And we see that a lot with what just happened. So I think it goes back to transparency and authenticity, right? So I think unfortunately, the political climate is shifting radically. And then also at the end of the day, we are businesses. So how it affects what we can do is something that's ever changing in the landscape. But at the end of the day, again, it's like authenticity. Like, I'm happy that some brands are creating funds, but at the same time, if they really wanted to make an impact, they wouldn't have donated to political parties. So I think it's really important to think about your employees first and what matters to them and how do you keep them safe, and then create actions for that. And then that will translate to a consumer. They'll see that in authenticity of action. But to make a statement because it's on trend can be really irresponsible when there's background for how you didn't support those groups in other decisions that you made previously in the year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can't remember if we've talked about much the internal group where you're the co-chair for the LGBT group internally. But I guess are there, interesting things that you're doing and changing there compared to maybe other organizations you've worked at in the past, or maybe even have like tips for other businesses to avoid certain pitfalls when running an internal community like that?
Sure. So I think ERGs, employee resource groups, are great opportunities for organizations to have employee-led groups that really talk about how different things affect them. So at Fossil, we have one for the Latinx community, we have one for women, we have one for the African American community, and we get together as a community. We have discussions. The one for the LGBT group is called Plus, and that I'm a co-chair of. And sometimes we have candid conversations that you feel like you're in a safe space, and you can say, "I am scared as hell about what's going on right now and what that means." And and what comes out of that as a resource group, we start talking about, well, what can we do for our community within this building? Who can we talk to? Can we talk to the local LGBT resource center and see if they can help us understand what are the legal ramifications of things that we need to do to help? So whether that's creating a power of attorney, a will, second parent adoption papers, these are things that are focused. We want to focus on how do we help the community within, and what resources can we give them for that help. And then, on the lighter side, sometimes it's about, finding what kind of entertainment, entertainment that has representation in it. That's really great. I think times like that is really important, and so much sorrow also, to remember how to laugh within your community and find entertainment within your community. So it's not all doom and gloom. And then the last part is just about, using them as a resource, even for, at least from a brand perspective, like, making product for these different cultural moments, making sure that you're doing it in a sensitive way. Does the community feel like it does give them a voice, and is it authentic to them? I think they can be a really great resource for brands to turn internally and have a focus group to make sure that they're doing things that matter to that community in an impactful way, and in a sensitive way, to make sure that they're thinking of using that voice, leading with that voice first of that community versus a commercial-led voice.
Yeah, absolutely. And to continue on that front, of course, you see all sorts of things come out in June, and some of them are, funny and lighthearted, like you're saying, and some you're like, that's funny, but I don't know if you should be the one that's saying that. We didn't talk about this before, but are there other brands that you've seen that have like you've been like, that's a great approach to it, or inspiring, or gets thoughts going for you on your side?
Yeah, I mean, I think I can tell you as a customer, right? I walked into Target and I saw their Pride collection, which comes out much earlier. And I was like, oh, I think I'm a little offended by some of this stuff. But then as I read a little more about it, they actually created the Pride lines with people within the LGBT community across the design categories. And so I think that's also important in marketing, is that sometimes, you know, you want to make sure you're telling consumers where it's coming from too. And, you know, so I was even blinded by that as a consumer for a second until I felt more. I think, you know, a lot of times, you know, we all know what happened with Burger King and their tops and bottoms. You know,
That was the one I was referencing.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, agencies sometimes have the best of intentions, but you do have to see where it lands. And that's where I think having those focus groups or having ERGs, or, you know, really making sure that you test that kind of, I don't want to use the word provocative, but maybe, you know, a humor that is a little more personal to that community. You want to make sure it lands right. And it just, I feel like a broken record saying like authenticity, but I think it is important to make sure that you're sensitive, that it lands right within the community.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of the community at large, somehow with this, I'm sure, very demanding job that you have, finding time to, you know, run an organization of your own. I know you mentioned at the very beginning, but can you tell us a little bit more about, you know, is that for local support of where you are, kind of resource for anyone? Where can people find more, and what you do?
Sure. So right now, Queernella is a business that my wife and I founded. It's a queer marketplace, and it really is just a resource to find community stuff that isn't just, you know, specific to Pride Month. And it came from, we got married and you know, people were saying like they couldn't find a same-sex card, or that, you know, they really wanted to get us something fun for the house or to celebrate our and it just, you couldn't find anything year round, or if it was like one shop that they said was in maybe like a trendier or more, you know, whatever kind of area of town. So we just decided we would create that. But I mean, we donate 10% of our profits year round, and we think that's really important to give back to the community. We try to use all queer makers for it, to give them a platform, or really strong advocate allies. Like, it's not just saying you're an ally, but truly making content and giving back to the community as an ally. And I think in the long run, our hope is that we can create an actual brick and mortar location that people can come and rent out for their special events, or have a gallery space for queer artists, and a center to create activism on behalf of the community and activate. But, you know, COVID has as usual made those plans a little more longer term than we'd like, but eventually we would love to have a place where we can meet together to discuss and get guidance on things going on, so that we can better arm our community with the knowledge that they need in order to protect themselves and their families.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of a little bit more on that, both, you know, at Fossil and in your own organization. You know, you mentioned like at Fossil, the several groups internally for inclusion. Is there a collaborative approach to the different, you know, organizations that you have there, or other orgs that you work with that kind of represent beyond LGBT, and kind of working with other people who are usually, you know, left by the wayside in the marketing community in the past?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, for different moments, whether it's Black History Month or Women's History Month, we try to stay also with the Hispanic Heritage Month. We really try to go to these groups and understand, you know, is important? Is it activism within the community? Do you want to see us creating initiatives, pathways for mentorship and internships? Do you want to create, what kind of impact do we want to create aside from products? And sometimes it is products. Sometimes it is about wearing something that's prideful for them, and they want to wear something that represents their community or from a creator within their community. So I think we really try to collaborate with them on those moments. And then also from like a collaborations perspective of product year round, making sure that we have a diverse intersection of collaborators to bring into our brand and create product with that isn't specifically around a cultural moment, but is just representative of diversity and inclusion and what our stances are for that as an organization.
Absolutely. Are there any, I guess, examples of the products, the ones that you've custom made for different groups that that you've loved and that were created?
Yeah. So for Black History Month last year, or this year, in fashion, my years are always confused. I think it was this year, 2022. We created a jewelry piece and a watch for Black History Month. And the tins, which are an important part of Fossil's DNA, was co-created with a Black artist. So I think, being able to tell the story of the designers behind that product, being able to tell the story of the packaging and working and collaborating with that, as well as donating to a fund to help artists within the African-American community was, I think, a really bold way of bringing that to market for the first time. We've done watches for International Women's Day before. We've worked with artists that have created from paintings, they created watch faces that showed the diversity of women globally, and that was a really fun project. But I think every year we kind of challenge ourselves for what does it look like next year, and how do we make sure it is done in a way that feels like someone wants to come back to the brand to get it again, but also brings in new customers in a way that makes them feel like they are seen and respected by the brand, most importantly, and that the brand's giving to their community in more ways than just a donation.
Absolutely. And for that part, a lot of organizations have, for different things, whether it was the influencers they work with, the vendors they work with, the partners they have, within your own organization, you mentioned that trying to always have people from the queer community who are, the providers. Is there and at Fossil, and you think larger, like, should people and brands and companies attain to like 50% diversity inclusion on programming, or do you think it's more fluid than that or higher than that? Kind of where do you think that should be for yourself, your org, the larger marketing space?
Sure. So I think, I think it can be more fluid than that, but I know from a procurement perspective that when it comes to our factories and practices and, other ways of gauging standards across the organization, we want to make sure that diversity is met. And we do have standards for human rights protections for different groups, from everything from our factories to our organization headquarters globally. So and the same thing goes for representation in marketing. We do fill out audits for that so that we can report it. Our first one comes out this year. So, but we've been reporting them internally for years. So I think it's really important to work with your DE&I or parts of the organization, HR, procurement, to make sure that you are meeting those standards, but also pushing those standards and working together as an organization in order to create what a truly diverse organization looks like that protects human rights from a factory to warehouse to a headquarters. Absolutely.
And that was a perfect segue into thinking about, I can't wrap my head around anyone who has a global role for a brand, because it's just, I can't imagine that the inclusiveness, the customization, all of that. But when it comes to the brand globally, do you customize per region or per country, or is it again like a cohesive voice across the globe?
Sure. I mean, I think it is a struggle for any global marketer. I think an even harder struggle is the regional teams that have multiple countries. Because, for example, even a North American team, doesn't have the amount of countries that, let's say, EMEA does or APAC does. And all of those countries have very different sensibilities to them and sensitivities too. But for the most part, we try to keep a global tone and voice. There are some initiatives with certain countries that are key markets for us that we will build localized campaigns. But it's always under the guidance of the global brand voice, but the casting maybe, like for example, in India, we use 2 Bollywood celebrities. So the casting is local, but the look and feel of the content we try to bridge whatever is the most relevant and feels most on brand for those settings. And I think the same thing with certain countries are obviously more, for things like Pride, are more involved culturally in that and have their own pride movements that are very vocal, and some are a little more conservative. So we kind of have to strike the balance between that. But at the end of the day, everyone's provided the same assets for the most part. And we try to push one global story, but obviously with spend and business initiatives, that does become quite a bargaining tool that our friends in other countries try to go back and forth with. But it's a welcomed conversation always. And at the end of the day, it's about, trying to drive the business in that country and what's needed to make them successful.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there, I guess, anywhere you want to see companies play in the future besides, I know you've mentioned it a few times, like having more money is always better to be able to do more.
Yeah.
But I guess, are there things that anything that you're excited about in the future of what Fossil might be doing with this, with the community, or where you would love to be participating, or if it's just, like you've said, more money, more scale?
Yeah, I think more money, more scale is good across the board, not even specific to any one initiative. But no, I think it's just about representation for all, communities. I think, watching what's happening in entertainment and the representation that's occurring in entertainment across the board for the LGBTQ community, it really does mean something at any age for you to see that and be able to see a storyline that feels like what your life looks like. So I think just continuing to push through these moments and show that, what holiday looks like in different family units. What does Valentine's Day look like? Sometimes it can feel like a simple gesture, but it actually means a lot for that person who sees that representation in that ad and feels seen by a brand and feels seen by, I think it also helps for advocating. I think it helps to, unfortunately, to use a word that I feel like can be somewhat triggering, like I think it helps to normalize it too. And I think that's, at the end of the day, the role that brands and entertainment play in showing that and having that representation out in the world. It shows acceptance. And I think that's the most important part.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Netflix has done an amazing job, in my opinion, in that, because when I now turn on my TV and see like you're saying, the thumbnails for all of them, I'm like, this is totally different. And then seeing the funding that's happening with, especially within our community, of like the Billy Eichner rom-com that everyone is so excited about, that's coming out like started promoting it months in advance. It's just a totally different like place. And the same thing within the Asian community, seeing them, getting more and more funding and representation there. It's been wonderful. But I don't want to hog all the questions, and I've been berating you with them for a while. So I don't know if there's anything from the audience that they wanted to cover, or if there was anything else that you wanted to cover as a part of the conversation today, or make sure that you got across, kind of what you came here to say.
Yeah. No, I think at the end of the day, it is, said again, just about authenticity and what feels right. And, really just making sure that you have voices at the table that represent the communities that you're creating these campaigns for and these products for, because I think that's how you end up maybe with a little bit of a Burger King situation is when you don't have the person at the table, or people at the table. You shouldn't have one person at the table. You should have people at the table that represent that community. So I think, being open to having those conversations and not creating these campaigns in silos is really important for, to make sure it's authentic and actually is led with good intention. And because even the best intentions can still fall flat if there's not that person at, those people at the table to say it, this is accurate or this isn't. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess to that point, how large is the Plus group internally? Do you find it is people are excited and ready to join and help out, or is it a little bit of a struggle to get as large a group as you want?
No, we have about 100 members across I don't know the number across the ERGs. So I think that that number, I think the largest one is the women's ERG. So I think, it's growing like any life that's happening with people. It is hard because it's meetings and more meetings on meetings, but I think it's kind of like the gym. You go and you may be like, oh, I have to go, I have to make time for it. And then you leave and you feel great when you come out of it all the time. So, so I think, keeping that up is important too, because you remember to be in a safe space with people who are like-minded and have, can also sympathize with what you're going through at any given moment, whether it be highs or lows. With Pride, it's hopefully a lot of highs. And we did the Dallas Pride this year as an organization led by the ERG, and that was fun. And so you get to celebrate together. Sometimes you may cry together. Sometimes you may laugh together. So I think it's really great. And I also think it's really great also within, because the resources we're bringing in are also teaching people within the community. Like our community is ever changing, and the allyship that's required from within the community to help those that that need a stronger voice at the table is ever changing as well. So I think the ERG has done a lot to educate each other on pronouns, educate each other on trans rights and why it's so important to advocate within the community for one another. So I think also recognizing that even within a community, it's really important to advocate, and those groups can be a resource for helping us understand what we need to do better as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think like you said, it's just great to focus on the things that are positively changing. There's been such huge strides, even thinking back myself 15 years ago, it's like not even the same world and how we interact with everyone with it.
For sure.
Yeah. But thank you so much again for your time and your experience and for supporting so many people at your organization and just everything that you're doing over there.
Great. Thank you guys for having me and having this moment to talk about it as we close out Pride.
Thank you both so much for joining us today. That was great. And I love the ERG as a gym analogy. I think that's just fantastic.
I do go to the ERG more than I go to the gym. That is for sure.
It all works.
Thanks so much.
Thanks so much, you guys.